Good morning. Good morning. Can you hear me in the back okay? My legs feel wobbly at the moment, and I think they're feeling wobbly for three reasons. First of all, I'm used to being by myself on a boat, so to be with a lot of people makes me a little bit nervous, so forgive me if I have sea legs a little bit. Secondly, I feel wobbly because I'm excited that my new book, it's my 9th book, called Dare to Dream, is actually being published this month. You'll see some pictures of it, and hopefully we'll be able to do a signing for those who want a copy later on. And I'm particularly delighted my Japanese literary agent, Eriko Takeuchi from Japan Uni, is here for the launch this morning as well. But I'm also wobbly because I'm used to being on the sea, not on the land. So I have sea legs. And when I shower, when I'm on land, I kind of get dizzy. So excuse my wobbly legs, but I'm missing one of the main companions or elements of my life. And that's my boat called Wahine, which is Hawaiian for women. And she's currently in Amami, Oshima. I've flown here for the conference. I'll go back on Monday and continue sailing to Okinawa. And I just like to take the first 2 or 3 minutes and just using video and for me to stop talking, for you just to my boat. And I'm not sure what I'm to do next. The clicker is this one, and it's the arrow. Right? I'm using the sails, not the electronics. Okay, point there. I'll let those images continue to play without the music as I talk, because my boat is more interesting to look at than me. I want to touch on 2 things this morning on what is the mindset of a lifelong learner, or what I like to call a never too later. I am a never too later. And thirdly, to talk about some lessons I've learned of being a digital nomad. Well, I'd like to start by telling you a true story of a few months ago. I was making my third attempt to sail to Amami Oshima down near Okinawa. I actually have lived on the boat for 4 years, and I left Tokyo Bay 2.5 years ago to cruise full time, occasionally followed by the History Channel, doing episodes by the same name, Dare to Dream. And my first attempt, I aborted. I was third of the way there, 2 days into the journey from Tokyo, and I had to abort because I realized the boat and I were not ready because I'm a rookie sailor. I'm learning how to sail. Secondly, the second time I was within a 2-day sail and was going to meet the History Channel to film a TV episode there. And there was an underwater volcano 1,000 miles off the coast of Japan. And an island of ash, pumice, floated down and flooded the harbors. And I was unable to go to Amami at that time. And I had to divert north to northern Kyushu instead. So now this last March was the third attempt to get to Amami, where I've been invited by the mayor of a remote inlet called Uken, and Dr. Haldane and his son have been there to visit me. And so I was emotionally attached to this secondary goal. My primary goal is eventually sail to Canada to the Great Pacific Garbage Patch and document that for my grandson and his generation. But this was my secondary goal because I had an invitation that was now over 2 years old. So I got to the south of Kagoshima, and I had about another 40-hour sail to go. This time I decided not to go solo because a young man, a Japanese man, asked if he could learn how to sail. So I allowed him to come on the boat with me, but his first time on a sailboat. So it was a bit of a risk. And the first few hours was blissful as we left Tanegashima, which is the Cape Canaveral of Japan. That's where they launched the space rockets. We circled around Yakushima, a famous island in Japan, for its rainforest and its waterfalls and its tall mountain peak in the fog where people trek to and sometimes even lose their lives getting to. We were around the Yakushima, and then the wind stopped, which would be fine normally. You don't mind being becalmed on a boat, but we were in a shipping lane, and nighttime was coming. And there was a tidal current, so my boat speed, I had a little bit of wind. My boat speed was maybe 1 or 2 knots. My speed over ground was higher because the tide was pushing, not the tide, the Kuroshio current was pushing me towards Hawaii, where I love Hawaii, but I wasn't really planning to go to Hawaii, and I didn't have enough provisions to get there. And I remember in the middle of the night, and I sent Shintaro down to sleep because we were taking turns on watch. We had to watch for ferries. There were only 3 sets of lights we saw on that dark night. One was the occasional ship that, I wouldn't say terrified me, but certainly got my attention because at such a slow boat speed, I had very little capability of maneuvering the boat out of the way. So I could only really pray and do my best. So I was watching where those boats were in the night. The other light was the incandescent glow of Suwanosejima, which is a volcanic island that I was banned from going. It'd be dangerous to go because it is an active volcano. And then just to the south of that was Ukejima Island, which is an island I'd heard about, but many, even Japanese, have never heard about it before. A very tiny island with only a handful of dozen, I think it's at time 59 people living on that island with a very dangerous harbor. But it had a lighthouse with a green light, which is unusual. And it was actually that green light that was my only point of reference. Because sometimes I'd get disoriented and I'd turn off all the electronics because I couldn't run the engine. There was the other problem. The engine wouldn't start. So there was no way and I had no wind. So I was conserving energy and I relied on that light to give me a bearing. And then in the middle of the night, the wind changed direction and started to blow from Hawaii. And I thought, there's no way I'm going to make it to Amami. And they were saying there's a potential storm. So I'll get back to Ukejima, which was about 50 kilometers away. So I turned my nose towards there, got halfway, and my sons who were in the room with me, they're part of my shore team. They were watching because I have Starlink on board. Thank you, Elon Musk. I was able to have a group of people kind of watching me and giving me advice along the way, and they were all seeing my tracks. And they, I was going out towards Hawaii, then I started to come back, and then the storm came, and it switched direction.
It was a low point because now I was hitting 4-meter waves. The storm was blowing me towards the volcano, which was both illegal and dangerous. And I couldn't start the engine. And that's where I contacted the shore team. They all came online. And one of the shore team is a marine mechanic. So Shintaro went down below, and for 90 minutes, my friend Tony, via satellite, took Shintaro through a set of diagnostics to try to get the engine going. Meanwhile, I was navigating 4-meter waves at 5-second periods, which is rather steep waves that I'm encountering, and just trying to keep the boat afloat and keeping Shintaro safe. And I remember it was now just coming to sunrise. Shintaro had woken up. He was now working down below. And Taro's tips came back to me. Taro, who gave me those 3 tips, who you saw on the screen, is an 80-year-old boat builder. He's designed boats for 3 America's Cup, Switzerland, New Zealand, and I forget the third one. Oh, Japan, I think it was. And he came and met me at one of my ports I was in, and he took me to see the catamaran that he's building to circumnavigate the world for the 3rd time. This is an 80-year-old man. And I said to Taro on the way back to my boat on this occasion in Tokyo Bay, well, you're so experienced. I'm such a beginner. I have so much to learn. What advice do you give me? And without hesitation, he shared with me those 3 things. Don't fall overboard. Number 1 tip. Number 2, stay calm, because panic will not solve the problem. And number 3, be happy, because remember, this was your dream and you chose to be here. And there was a really helpful anchor point for my emotions and my kind of cognitive processes in that very unpleasant few hours where I did wonder what, and I could utter expletives in a number of languages, am I doing here? But you know, if it hadn't been for the storm, which I eventually got to Ukejima on the day that the weekly ferry was to arrive with the groceries for the 59 people who live there, and the ferry didn't arrive that day because it was too dangerous, but there was I surfing the 4-meter wave into the inner harbor. If it hadn't been for the storm, I would have never discovered what they describe as a divine island. And I spent 3 days on this island, which I fell in love with and was remarkable, and was my background basically is in community development in terms of sustainability projects with the NGO. And I was fascinated with every aspect of this loving, welcoming community that welcomes mariners who need a place of refuge. And so I'm thankful for the storm. And over the last 4 years, as I've embarked on this new part of my life, I'm still very much involved with Hope International, but because I'm from the nonprofit sector, I didn't have a mountain of money to bring to my dream of owning a sailboat, sailing her one day, crossing an ocean. So I've had to make the hobby into a business very early on. And so many people ask me, you know, it must be nice to be retired. And I quickly informed them that I'm not, because I have to generate revenue to make all this happen. Plus, I've had to learn a whole lot the last 4 years. I knew a little bit about the dynamics of sailing because I used to sail dinghies, but now I have a 40-foot sailboat, which, although the sailing principles are the same, there's so many other functionalities on the boat I've had to learn, including diesel engines, which I've become a little bit more not an expert at. To make a living, I've become a YouTuber. My channel is Pacific Solo, by the way. If you're interested, it's totally free to subscribe. So I've had to learn. I now have over 300 videos over 2 channels. The first 30, I had a professional do the editing and decide what the story was. And then I kind of grew impatient with the time lag to have a video editor. And I thought, I better just start learning how to do this myself. One of my sons who's here is actually in the film business, so he gave me some tips. I've never progressed to the level that he's at. I'm still on just an iPhone, an iMovie, but I've got over 300 videos online, and Professor McNally is one of my biggest followers and fans. Thank you very much. very, very much, Jim. So I've had to learn so much. I've had to learn about the clouds. I've learned so much more about the clouds that you can discern the weather that's minutes away, hours away, and potentially a week or two away for the type of clouds that you see on the horizon. I've learned about navigation. And also, most importantly, I've learned a lot about myself, that this has always been a journey into the soul as much as it's been a journey across the sea. And so let me just make a couple of comments about the mindset of a lifelong learner, or what I call a never too later, and also a couple of things about being a digital nomad. To be a learner means you're always, as you know, moving into areas that you know little about. Learning is about discovery. Sometimes those discoveries can be unsettling, or you may be fearful of the journey to begin with towards enlightenment. And fear is the constant companion of a never too later. It's sometimes the obstacle. But fear, I've discovered, should not be your foe. I wouldn't necessarily call it a friend, but it certainly is a companion that is present at every milestone and threshold in our lives as we move forward and do something new, whether it's advancing to another degree, a career change, perhaps even coming to Japan for the first time, getting on an airplane for the first time. We all experience fear, but there's a joy that abounds once that threshold is passed. I often liken it to rappelling, or as they call it in England, or abseiling, where you step backwards over a cliff. And you've been trained, there's ropes and everything, and you've seen the pictures of the people going down the cliff, jumping out from the cliff, dropping. It looks exciting. But I know when I did it for the first time, and I've only done it 3 times, I think, but the training was fine. It all made perfect sense to me. But when I stood on the edge of the cliff, inched my heels backwards, and then the instructor says, now lean back, there's a moment of acute terror. But once you cross it and you're over the edge, it's exhilarating. So fear is a companion with whom we have to navigate the future with. And that is what has been a lifelong learner. That has been a never too later of moving into the unknown. I think it may be years since I last told this story. I promised my family I won't tell any of the same stories today because I have both my sons and their wives here. But I think they've heard this one, and it only comes to my mind now, and I'm already blushing by telling it. But it's kind of like the first time I kissed my wife. It was terrifying. Terrifying because I'd overheard her say to a friend before I started to court her that she would never let a boy kiss her unless the boy asked permission first. And I thought, Lowell, remember, it's a very useful piece of intelligence. So we began to date, and I won't bore you with all the stories, but finally one Sunday evening in Vancouver, Canada, I plucked up the courage to invite her to walk around Stanley Park with me into a place called Hallelujah Point. Has anybody ever been to Stanley Park in Vancouver? Or few have. Very romantic place. And the way I lured her to this romantic location was I asked her, because I was kind of sheepish and shy, so would you like to go watch the submarine races with me? She went, oh, I've never seen a submarine race before. So off we went. And then eventually she asks, as we're walking along Hallelujah Point, well, where's the submarines? And I said, well, of course, when they race, you can't see them. They're under the water. So let's stroll over to the totem poles. And I had it all pictured in my mind that she would just melt in my arms for that very first kiss. But then the moment came I had to ask her. And I realized she could say no. And then, I mean, it's one thing to practice at home in the mirror, but to actually be there, you have to deal with the consequences of somebody else's decision. But oh, the joy when she said yes. And the rest of that story is none of your business. So fear is that constant companion that is the window through which we experience the exhilaration of life. I was talking to a group of CEOs yesterday at a thing called the Delphi Network. We were talking, they were asking me about fear. And there was another episode where I nearly sunk between Japan and Korea, had to be rescued by the Coast Guard. My son, the film director, said it was my best video ever. I said, why? Because you cried. And because it was terrifying. I forget where that train of thought was taking me. So let me move on. It may come back to me. So fear is a threshold that we experience. Oh yes, the CEOs yesterday morning, and I said to them, and I hadn't really thought about it this way, but as I said it, I knew it was absolutely what I believe. I've never felt more alive than those acute moments when you know your life could be lost. And I wouldn't wish near-death experiences on anybody, but there is something about those moments of terror where you're experiencing something for the first time is when you feel fully alive. So my journey as a never too late or a lifelong learner is as much a journey into the soul and discovery about myself as it is a discovery of many different new things about life in the universe. And I'm doing all this because I want to leave a legacy for my grandson. As a digital nomad, and this is kind of the more practical and not so much the inspirational part of the talk, but I've had to produce revenue. And perhaps some of you are considering that, and maybe some of you are already successful earning revenue from different means online. You may have channels or Instagram accounts, and it may be a side hustle, as I think is an unhelpful term, but people in the digital marketing business use. But out of necessity, I've had to create income from what I'm doing. So from the boat, I'm involved in two small companies. One is actually my son's company, and I support him in what he's doing in his film business in a small way. And the other is a startup called the Never Too Late Academy. And for that, I have a group of investors. And I've learned so much doing both of those things because I'm from the nonprofit sector. The things I wanted to just share with you about being a digital marketer is, number one, it's not easy. And we see all the success stories on YouTube, on Instagram, social media, but it's not easy. It's a job like anything else that you have to work at. Secondly, on the plus side, it provides a lot of freedom as a digital nomad. I can work anywhere. I return to my boat on the weekend. I will sail to Okinawa. I'll be creating content along the way. And of course, we all know that's the plus side. Thirdly, as a digital nomad, you can choose to live very simply. My fallback is if all else fails, I'll just take my floating home and sail to the Philippines, where my daughter-in-law is from, and she's here today. By the way, Maria, there's 99 other Filipinos here today in Filipinas. So there's 100 now. Yeah, you just made it a century. Maybe the biggest crowd yet at IAFOR Conference. But you can live very simply. I know some digital nomads that live extravagantly because they're now in that level of income. But also, you have to stay the challenge, and this relates back to being a lifelong learner. You know, the context, the ecosystem you're in is constantly changing. So you have to be constantly learning. My area where I know most about is YouTube, and became monetized, still a small channel. I was able to monetize it in kind of non-conventional ways that helped me buy the boat and keep me afloat. But the YouTube algorithm is always changing. And let me just give you a couple practical tips and insights about YouTube. And if you have more to offer me, please speak to me privately afterwards. But it used to be 10 years ago with YouTube, even 3 years ago, to be successful on YouTube, basically, you had to be concerned about subscribers and frequency. Just load lots and lots of stuff up there. Doesn't matter how bad, etc. it is. That has changed. For the algorithm no longer cares about how many subscribers a channel has. subscribers, it's more subscriber levels are now more vanity issues between channel or content creators. That's how we compare ourselves with each other. But the algorithm doesn't care. Neither does it care about frequency. What it is concerned is about views and retention. So it tests every video that's put up with a kind of a very closed market, partly from your network, and it puts it out to the wider network. It monitors the number of views coming through, and it monitors how long those people are watching the video. And so that's what you have to pay attention to now with YouTube particularly. And the way it initially discerns who to put your video in front of, it always has been the title, the thumbnail, keywords in your description. But in the last few months, it's also the first 8 seconds of audio, what you are saying about what is to come, and it will somehow discern discern who may be interested in your video, because ultimately the algorithm is interested in making money for the shareholders of Google, who owns YouTube, and they want to see whether you're a good advertising space for their advertising. So life has been full of storms for me of late. I wouldn't trade any of those storms for the nutrition, the nourishment, and the precious relationships that has brought into my life. And part of my vision is not just to be a lifelong learner, but I want to be motivated I want to do things that leave a legacy for others. And in the conference of educators, that is all of our vision. We are in teaching or training or in education because to some measure, we all have a vision, not only for our own career advancement, but to see the next generation and to see future leaders grow. I'm often asked, and I'll come back to the book that's kind of being launched today, Dare to Dream. Part 1 is the armchair adventure. Part 2 is I give a 4-step program to redesign your life. And I use the word DARE as the acronym, DARE, as this 4-step program, how to detect your dream, how to amplify your dream, how to have readiness goals to put your dream into action, and how to enjoy your dream. And the book is kind of fleshed around that. Many people have asked me, and 2 people even the last week, a man and a woman, say, well, how do you know what your dream is? And I think, and I have a process I coach people through to discover what dream can be so compelling, it will wake them up in their retirement or get them to change their careers. Well, I think an important element of that dream is legacy. What gets me up in the morning and to do the things I do is I think of my grandson, Eli, because I want him to point at whether it's a YouTube video, a book, or a community that now has clean water in Cambodia, and be able to say, my grandpa did that. That's what's important to me. So my book is being launched. I'm closing now. I think I have 3 minutes left. And so just to say, the books were to have arrived today, or my little shipment of books from the London publisher. And I don't know whether they're here or not. They have arrived. Okay. So, because they've been tied up with Japan Customs for 5 days. So I was worried about that. So I'll be at a table outside near reception. You'll see me. I've worn kind of my sailors, the only dress up clothes I have on the boat. And I'll be there. And the normal cost is, it works out to about 3,000 yen. But for the conference here, if you want a book, I'll sign it for you, 2,000 yen. Plus, as long as the supplies last, I'll give you a free copy of my other book called Never Too Late, which has kind of become my manual and what the Academy was named after. And so I'll be there on and off over the next couple of days, but I'll be there for a few moments after the photograph. So thank you again, Dr. Haldane, and thank you everybody for coming.